Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our second episode of Geritalks. Adrian, how are you?
Good morning. Feeling great. Thank you.
Adrian, we have a very special guest today.
Yes, we do.
We have Keith Whelpley. Keith is a graduate from NMSU. He studied and practiced journalism before starting his own publishing company and Southwest Senior Monthly. Published in Las Cruces and El Paso. The paper focused on senior health and lifestyle issues. Keith, thank you very much for coming today.
I'm excited to be part of this new podcast.
Oh, very well. Thank you very much. We're excited today because one of the things that I talked to Keith and to Adrian, I really wanted to give an introduction to our podcast regarding some changes of aging, some concepts, some numbers on how society will need to live with this aging population, and how some of the changes that we're seeing now and some of the future changes that we will see in the near future. I want to start with a little phrase here that I read, and I think that it will be a great introduction to our podcast today. It says, "The world is facing a situation without precedent. We soon will have more older people than children and more people at extreme old age than ever before. As both the proportion of older people and the length of life increase throughout the world, key questions arise. Will population aging be accompanied by a longer period of good health, a sustained sense of well-being, an extended periods of social engagement and productivity, or will be associated with more illness, disability, or dependency? How will aging affect healthcare and social cost? Are these future inevitable, or can we act to establish a physical and social infrastructure that might foster better health and well-being in older age?" Keith, I think these are huge areas, of concern, obviously, for current healthcare, current society, because no doubt we're getting older.
As a publisher of a senior paper, I saw that a lot. I went to a lot of seminars, but most importantly, I spoke with a lot of people in their own life context, and I saw how they were aging in place, and it's interesting to see the number of senior citizens that are sort of as they enter the old age arena, whatever you want to define that as. They're more technologically savvy. However, their parents, many of them are still taking care of their parents that aren't so technologically savvy. And so when you talk about how we address this, and I was reading an article this morning about technology and how that's going to help us, you still have an aging population that doesn't engage with technology. So it becomes very difficult. However, I think we're setting the stage for the next generation who is more technologically savvy. People like me, I'm 60 years old. I'll be part of the group that can go online and look for those kinds of things. But it's going to be a challenge, I think, through this transition area, because we have a whole lot of senior citizens who aren't technologically savvy. And so reaching those people, Adrian, that's hard for everybody to reach these people. So it is a challenge for you healthcare providers.
Correct. No, I agree. And especially knowing that, you're thinking about, this is going to be something that it will be something that human being we have not seen. And, in the next 5 years, the number of people 65 and older will outnumber children under age of 5. So obviously, and that's something that we have never seen. We're not prepared about it. And obviously that's associated with obviously increased life expectancy and increase and decrease the number of pregnancies, I guess, fertility.
One of the other challenges is that as you have more senior citizens and fewer children to take care of them, it leaves a lot of them sort of out there by themselves the older they get. They don't have a family to sort of pull them in and take care of them. And so it becomes society's problem or issue that they have to deal with. And how do we reach these people as society? How do we keep them more engaged? So as the number of seniors increases and the number of people who traditionally would take care of them decreases, there's where the problem's going to lie.
That's true, and I think you see a lot of this, Adrian, in your
definitely.
work environment. Families struggling, obviously take care of their loved ones.
Yes, it's highly unbalanced right now, even to this day, when it comes to the younger demographic taking care of the older demographic. We're running out of folks. You're very much right. I noticed that just in the type of caregivers that I hire, a lot of them are more older in their age, as compared to 10 years ago when I was hiring a lot younger folks, nursing students and stuff like that. They're just not as available as they used to be.
Right. For instance, when right now we're dealing with my wife's mother, who's moved into an assisted living, and I think we have seen a lot of people who resist moving into that. They want to live at home, and this is another challenge that's going to be faced: is that people want to live the rest of their lives in their homes, with as close to their families and their circle of friends as they can possibly be. Because once you reach that place, like an assisted living center, I think intellectually, mentally, emotionally, people start getting their lives in order for the next phase, which is passing on. And I think the longer you can stay in these family situations, these social situations, and outside of these group homes where you've got so many other people who are struggling, I think the longer you can keep them out, the longer they live.
Yeah. And I think there's actually a growing trend in noticing the type of institutional or facility type care that is starting to incorporate more of a lifestyle of approach.
The intentional living.
The intentional living, yes.
And I've read so much about this. What's happening is it's sort of the hippie movement.
Right.
You know how the hippies thought this communal living.
Communal, correct.
But it didn't work. I was talking to one senior who was a hippie. She says, let me tell you, it didn't work then. But now these people are saying, okay, well, let's take that model and see if we can make it work in our senior years. We're all single. We're all mentally vibrant. We may not all be physically vibrant. Some of us are, some of us aren't. But if we all collectively move to one place, and the physically vibrant can take care of, roll my garbage out to the curb, and that sort of thing. I think there's going to be some strong experiments that way. I don't know if it'll work, but you're already seeing communities like that pop up.
I've been seeing it already happen in Santa Fe, mostly here in New Mexico. In Texas, it's a little bit different. I think it's just the amount of space in between, causes a difficulty.
I think me as a geriatrician, the most that I see, patients being concerned is losing independency. I think that's huge, and you start losing independency the moment that maybe you may not be able to drive. That's huge, obviously. And and I see that that's kind of the main concern. And when you're saying about moving to assisted living, right away, that's kind of the potential threat, about already starting to lose independency. And obviously that's what the main concern of most of my patients.
Is the loss of dependency something that's tied to their physical wellness, or is it tied to maybe their emotional wellness?
I think both, to be honest.
It's a good mixture of both.
Yeah, I think it's both, obviously it's case by case, but obviously, it could go either way for sure.
I am noticing that a lot of the focus now when it comes to medicine, when it comes to facility type of care, senior care in general, it's heavily promoted on maintaining, if not regaining, some of that independence. It's not focusing on what you've lost. It's focusing on what you can keep and what you can regain.
Correct.
That's
the correct.
Model.
That is correct. That is correct.
And that takes care providers. As somebody who's getting old, and I'm facing some of the issues that people face when they get old. That's where good communication with healthcare providers. Somebody needs to tell me, you don't need to lose your hearing so badly, or you don't need to lose your vision so badly. But I wouldn't know that unless I'm communicating with good healthcare providers.
Sure.
Yeah. Very quick, I just want to throw this number because obviously it's kind of huge. This is the number of people age 65 and older is projected to grow from an estimated of 524 million in 2010 to nearly 1.5 billion by 2050. And of course, it may increase more in developed countries. So obviously, huge concerns, on the number of people, getting older, especially when you refer to the old, that is the 85 and older. Those are the highest growing population, as we speak, and it will be in the next years, and especially the number of people living up to 100. is even higher. You know, to be honest, I always tell people here, 80s are the new 70s, 90s is the new 80s.
Correct.
You know, you cannot imagine how many people walk in this office on the 80s, 90s, and they're doing well. They're healthy. Some of them they're pretty healthy and they're still independent. So obviously the life expectancy for sure is changing a lot.
I remember my father. My father died at age 61. I'm 59, going to be 60 this year, and he didn't look anything like I look. Yeah, it's the quality of life. It's nutrition. It's
Physical
education, physical activity. He died at 61 because of a bad lifestyle. It was something secondary to diabetes. But I wonder how many patients that doctors are going to be seeing in the next 10 years. Me, for instance, say I'm 70, and I don't look like the 70-year-old of today. But how long can you go before your body does start giving out, or how hard can you push back against old age?
Well, I guess I have said it before, and I'm said it again. For sure, by far, the key the key best advice for healthy aging obviously is exercise. So and I said it in one of the other Tip Tuesday. That somebody asked me one day, what is my best advice for healthy aging? I said exercise. That I still believe that obviously that will keep your muscle function at the top. But the patient came to me and said, I don't agree with you, Dr. Duran. I think it's attitude. And I think, that's huge. How much, an attitude, obviously depends, how many people have come here that they're 60, that they feel that they're 80, and how many people in their 80s feel that they're 60. So yeah, I think you did said well when we talked about, exercise, nutrition, obviously controlling your chronic medical conditions, staying on the top on that for sure is key.
And let's not count out emotional well-being as well. We have the physical, the healthcare, but the mental status of the senior citizen that's has more of a support system, or has a lot more access to education, or a lot more access to information using the internet, things like that. They really are studying themselves and feeling more confident that they could live longer, better lives.
Yeah, I agree, and I think one of the things that it has been compromised. I guess this way of active and healthy living of older adults is the increased prevalence of dementia or Alzheimer's. Right. For sure, that has changed. The lifestyle and potentially the long-term future of some of these people. Not only because it creates heavy economic and social burden to the system, to their families, to the patient, and where we're saying that obviously the older you get, the more prevalent it is. You're talking about people 85 and older; they have a prevalence of 25 to 30%. They will develop some type of dementia.
Is there any way that you can push back against that in your lifestyle as you're younger, as you're getting older? Is it written in the leaves, written in stone that you will get dementia, or what are some of the things that you can do as a young person? Say I'm taking care of my mom and dad and I'm seeing them get dementia. I'm thinking to myself, how can I prevent that from happening to me? What can I do to my lifestyle to minimize the possibility?
Well, no doubt, definitely, it has been shown that, the same lifestyles that you do to preserve and, for other problems like cardiovascular disease or preventing the risk of stroke, same things you can do for prevalence of preventing dementia. If you have high blood pressure, controlling your blood pressure, controlling your diabetes, exercise, diet, controlling your cholesterol, those risk factors have been shown that, there also could be risk factors for dementia, and controlling those risk factors have some effect on preventing some dementia. Again, there are different types of dementia. We'll go into that maybe some other podcast. But there's some dementias that they may be genetic, that they may inherit. That obviously those potentially could be harder to prevent. But it's still 80% of the dementia these days is a mix. It's a combination. Even people with Alzheimer, they have some type of vascular dementia. So those vascular dementia, the risk factors that potentially could be the same as any cardiovascular disease, that you can potentially help prevent them.
Yeah. I want something you said, Adrian, that I wanted to comment on as well, because I see it in my current experience, but it's the emotional well-being. And a lot of folks who are put in a position of having to care for their parents, they forget the little things. They're always working on the big things, and the little things, I mean, taking somebody who you're caring for an ice cream, or taking them to a movie, or taking them to a dog show, or taking them to something that seems small and trivial in your life because you're young and you're trying to get things done, but to that person, that can, in terms of their mental health and their emotional well-being, that can last a week. They talk about it and they remember it.
Right.
And in my own experience, we're finding that those little things, and we never would have thought it because we thought they were too little. But we found a favorite place to go for ice cream. We brought my wife's mother there, and she loved it. She loved the ice cream. She loved the engagement. She loved, and she talked about it forever, and she wanted to go again. So we took her again. These kinds of things are huge when it comes to caring for, exercises, physical therapy is important. All these things are important, but I think we sort of forget the little things, the emotional things.
You're very right, and there's an aspect of healthcare that's barely being touched upon. Some types of services are utilizing this thing called motivational interviewing. It's actually it's brilliant in a way that it gets the patient to buy into their plan of care. And it's not just doom and gloom. If you don't control your diabetes, you're going to get retinopathy. If you don't control your diabetes, they're going to take off your toes. No, it's if you controlled your diabetes, what would you do? If you were healthy and happy, what would you do? And it's the flip. 10, 20 years ago, the focus was, we'll show the patient what could happen in the negative way. And now instead, let's talk about what can happen in the positive way and work towards that goal. So that emotional, mental well-being is really taking more of a lead in healthcare right now. And that's what I've noticed being in the industry.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's exciting. I wanted to throw a little bit of, it was interesting, when we talked about, humanity and aging and, how the population is getting older, we see, some of these numbers, here in the United States, but you suddenly see other countries and the problem with aging is even worse. We're talking about, they said between 2010 to 2015, the number of older people in less developed countries is projected to increase more than 250% compared with 71% on developed countries. Like in China, the people that are 65 and older, currently is 110 million, is going to increase to 330 million by 2050. Also, India, the current older population is 60 million and is projected to exceed 227 million in 2050. An increase nearly 280% from today. They said by the middle of this century, there could be 100 million Chinese over the age of 80. This is an amazing achievement considering that there will be fewer than 14 million people this age on the entire planet just a century ago. Wow. So obviously, this is, we're concerned about, some of the changes here in the United States, but, this is a problem that is not national. This is a problem that is worldwide, obviously.
Yeah. I wonder how, as a nation, you can come up with a model that can be moved over to every nation. You can't say these figures without wondering about why this is happening. And of course, the fertility in all these countries are going down. And what you're finding is that as countries become more developed, fertility rates go down, and fertility rates means the number of children. I think we have 1.8 or 1.18 child per female. In Mexico, they have 2.1. So they're a lot higher than us. They're almost double us, but it's still pretty low. But why are people not having children? And that's an important question because we need those people to take care of the aging population.
Yeah, and I think when it comes about culture, like in Mexico, I believe originally from Mexico, older adults tend to live with their children, and not that it's a trend that is happening here, obviously more, but obviously they're as you said, there are more children, so they're more. Eventually more people to take care of them. And of course, in Mexico, there's no long-term care facilities. We don't have assisted living. We don't have nursing homes. So some of these elderly parents they don't have another option rather than
Right.
just going to with their kids.
It has something to say when you're thinking about more developed countries
Mhm.
as opposed to underdeveloped countries, and how the underdeveloped countries seem to have more reverence for their seniors
Right, right.
and their older population. They take better care of them, in my opinion.
And that goes to staying relevant, letting
Yeah.
them stay relevant in the
Mhm.
day-to-day of family operations. I mean,
Correct.
One thing that I was discussing just a few minutes ago with a patient, and I think that's something that, when we talked about the culture of aging, and that's something that we are seeing these days, is that, my generation, for sure, I learned how to respect elders. And that's something that it was part of my education.
mhm.
Unfortunately, I guess, with all good exceptions, sometimes that's not the case anymore. And, we think that, I think we see sometimes, this lack of respect to the elders these days. And that's something that obviously, it needs to change. It needs to change some way, somehow.
I think in the United States, the culture of pushing your elders away is probably more dominant than in Mexico. I've worked with many people who were Americanized Mexicans
Mhm.
who spend so much time and money making sure they go back home to Mexico to visit their families.
Sure.
In America, there's not that connection, that long-lasting connection. The farther away they get, the less they think or even want to see their seniors. And yet, there's another problem right there. When you have when your mom and dad live in Houston, and you live here in Las Cruces, for instance, and you go to Houston and say, well, you're too old, you got to live near us. There's going to be heck to pay because
Correct.
that's their family, that's where they've grown, that's where their social circles are. Move them to a new city, and then that sort of triggers maybe a downward decline in their well-being, their emotional well-being.
I agree. I think, people ask me all the time, kids come to visit parents here to Las Cruces. And, and they ask me, well, by the way, we would like to move my parents back to North Carolina. And I said, I always tell patients, believe me, you'll be better close to kids. I'm happy that you have kids that they want to be with you. They want to take care of you. Not every people can say the same. And yeah, that is a struggle, of some of the people that they have lived for many years here. Kids are outside Las Cruces. They want to stay in the community, but eventually they can for X or Y.
Right, right.
We're talking back to the aging in the world. Actually, the World Health Organization has a study that is called the World Health Organization Study on Global Aging and Adult Health. It's called the SAGE study, and they're actually studying. It's a multi-country longitudinal study designed for just collect data all around the world from 6 different countries, 50 years and older. And they're collecting data between, risk factors, they're doing a health exam, they're doing biomarkers, and they're trying to compare different countries and different, and trying to collect data from these places. I think hopefully, eventually from them, we can, find out some data that will be helpful, maybe some data that could be happening here, that eventually they can take that data to somewhere else in some other countries. As we said, the aging population for some of these countries may be more of a big problem than the one that we have here.
Yeah. Doctor, one of the things I'm curious about is in the patients that you see, when you see children bringing their moms and dads in for checkups, do you see the same lifestyle characteristics with the children that you see with their patients?
No, I don't. And, and it depends, I think the older generation, we're talking about the people that are right now in their 80s or 90s, there were people that usually, some of these people grew up in the farms. So they were pretty active, they were pretty active, I always kind of laugh a little bit because when they were younger, they're starting drinking, like, the milk, directly from the cow, and people were concerned about tuberculosis, and we were concerned about all these things. And just to find out today that we're eating, fast food that may be way much worse than what they were eating before. So these people were pretty active, were pretty healthy. A lot of them, especially the male population, they joined the military. So they were very, they stay pretty physically active. Mm-hmm. It depends. Obviously, some of the newer generations, I think they're going more into the exercise. But I think the diet is a big factor.
I think it's yeah.
I think diet, for sure, by far, has changed the way that we live. Obviously, the risk of obesity, in the elder has increased drastically. Just because of the type of diet and obviously lack lack of exercise.
Even in my own situation, Adrian, I had some heart issues, as you know, that I've had to deal with. And even though you don't like going through heart issues, one of the things, a true positive in this all, is I completely converted my diet. I got rid of fat. I got rid of processed foods. I got rid of sugars, simple carbohydrates. And doctor, you're right, because the minute you start changing your diet, it doesn't take long before you start feeling better. I mean, I think it's even faster than exercise. I exercise a lot.
Right.
And I tell you what, doing the flip on my diet, I started feeling a lot better than in a shorter amount of time than changing my activity level. And I've done both, and I have to say the one silver lining in having this heart issue is that I've flipped my diet, and in so many other ways made myself healthier.
People underestimate, I recently did myself, I cut down on carbs. I did no carbs for 2 months. And because I was feeling pretty tired, pretty fatigued, I will come to my wife and said, I feel tired. I'm 44. There was no reason why I should feel tired. And I did two things. I actually cut down on carbs and increased the amount of water that I drink. I started drinking more water. And, and it was drastic, to be honest. It was, really made me feel way much better, well more energized. For the people that are hearing out there, we have said it in Tip Tuesday. Please drink water. That's far. We don't drink enough water. I was read once that I always, it's kind of interesting that, like every morning, somebody like me, we drink a coffee and we feel like, we drink coffee and we feel a little bit better. The reality, you need to understand that, most probably have been without a glass of water for probably 8 to 12 hours. Haven't drink anything. So guess what? You wake up pretty dehydrated.
And people do the math on this. Well, I didn't drink water, but I had Coke. I had I had 2 Cokes, or I had a cup of coffee, 2 cups of coffee. So doesn't that count?
No, actually not, because some of these things are pretty diuretic. So drink coffee, it'll be a diuretic too.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's true. Your body is the first person to reward you for your lifestyle change, right? It's going to reward you for making the good decisions, and it's also going to punish you for making the bad decisions.
Right.
You have to take care of it.
And your human body is an amazing thing. If you just do the right thing, it wants to do good. It really wants to do good. And I learned that with my own heart condition. I flipped my diet, and my general practitioner, she was amazed, because I was actually, you may not know this, but I was diagnosed pre-diabetic. I wasn't heavy, but I drank a lot of sodas, and I had a lot of things. I learned about inflammation, and maybe I didn't know much about what inflammation really was. But anyway, had the test done again. It went away, not even close to being pre-diabetic. So fantastic. It moves that fast.
Yeah, it does.
Do good by your body, it will do good by you.
I was when talking about inflammation, when I was in medical school, I had a teacher for immunology, and she used to say, this is obviously like 25 years ago, she said, like, everything, believe me, Dr. Duran, Roberto, believe me, Roberto, eventually everything will have an inflammatory, it will be all related to inflammation. How right she was, for sure. Now everything, we know that inflammation plays big factor on most of them, all diseases.
And when somebody like me hears it, the lay people hear it, we think inflammation. Oh, you got a big red spot on your hand.
Right.
I think, I don't have any red spots on my hand. What's he talking about? Inflammation. But it's, simple sugars you drink cause inflammation inside. You'll never see it, but it's causing inflammation.
It's a little more complicated than what we thought. Let's talk a little bit about living longer. As we said, obviously we have, obviously we're living longer, and the life expectancy right now, average, I guess, for here for this country is 81 years old, compared to other countries like developed countries like Japan is like 83 years old. So, and obviously that changed based on ethnicity, male or female. So obviously that's kind of an average. But obviously has been, there are a couple of factors obviously that has changed too much. Obviously, children, they don't die as they used to. And obviously vaccination has been a big part of humanity, how much we have been able to decrease these infection diseases, as with vaccinations. We talked about, now we can vaccine, millions of people were saved due to the vaccines of smallpox, polio, and other major childhood killers like measles. But also, there's better better living standards. The water is cleaner, nutrition is better. So obviously that has reduced tremendously
technology and medicine,
mortality of child mortality. And at the same point, as you said, Adrian, mortality, technology has made us live longer. For sure, a lot of advances in medicine, for good or bad, but obviously they have increased our life expectancy. One thing that I was reading that I was kind of interested in is, how much, it seems to be that, we're living longer. What is the real lifespan of human being? Like for how long
the
we
question
can
is
live?
the quality, not the quantity,
It's-
right?
Right? Do you want to live that long?
Do we want to live
Exactly,
that old?
exactly.
Yeah.
And they said, there was some experts assume that we're approaching the upper limits, but data from life expectancies from between 1940 and 2007 show a steady increase, averaging about 3 months of life per year. So,
I think going back to what we just said about quality of life and whether you want to live that long, you see, I had some family that lived till close to 100. And I remember my grandmother, and I remember her looking in the newspaper for obituaries. There came a time when all of her friends were gone. All of her, her family, of course, they had their young lives. They had kids to raise. And here she was in Florida, and her husband had passed. And you start wondering, is living longer really what it's all cracked up to be? I mean, there comes a time, where's the benefit? You want to go to that place where your friends are and your family are, who've gone before you, whether you believe in that or not. But you start thinking that way, and I know she started thinking that way. So, the upper limits may be a limit we don't want to go.
I think I've seen something culturally that's changed, a gigantic shift between the generational differences, is the spiritual well-being of the individual. I mean, we can talk about physical, we can talk about mental, emotional. When I take my daughter to church, she's in catechism. Before then, I wasn't going to church, but now that I have to take her because the catechism class is requiring it, I noticed there's a huge change in the ages there.
What are you saying?
It's more senior oriented. There's more older people there at church than there are people like my age, with young families, smaller, younger families. It's more of a shift towards the older population. And that kind of gets me thinking, well, okay, so when you're talking about the quality of life, or when you're losing your loved ones, your friends, and you're starting to become a little bit more sheltered, a little less outgoing because your social circle is just diminishing, does that mean, people tend to turn more towards the spiritual side, something that's the constant?
They look for answers.
They look for answers.
Yeah. I think the reality, church or Sunday Mass becomes kind of a very important social activity for a lot of people, especially for people who cannot drive, family, they become like a family kind of event that, they go and pick up mom and, they take her to church, and sometimes, they go after that, they go for lunch. So obviously it becomes like a big social event.
And if it's a good, healthy church, then you have people who may not be family, but they'll check up on you.
Correct.
They'll make sure you're okay. They didn't see you where they normally see you, and then they'll check up. In Adrian, in your business, you probably see this a lot, and that is kids, the children of seniors. Maybe they're close to 100, who for their own purposes, for their own well-being, want their parents to live longer, but the parent is of the mind, I'm not crazy, I'm not demented. It's time for me to go.
Yeah.
Yet you have family just fighting and arguing about how you can make this person live longer.
Sure.
And I'm sure you've had to school some kids about.
My grandmother was a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
She was a nurse. My mom's a nurse. So all her life she was a DNR from age 50 on up. She just said, if it's my time to go, it's my time to go.
Yeah.
Don't make me stay around any longer than I need to. That kind of mentality. It's not just with her. I do see it often in my line of work. When people are ready to go, they're ready to go, and that's a difficult conversation.
And the kids don't want to let them go.
Hold on forever, as much as they possibly can.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I agree. So I guess the next question that I have for you guys is: are we living healthier as well as longer lives, or are we, or our additional years are spent in poor health? And of course, that talks to a little bit about disability, and obviously when it comes to disability, it's a major concern obviously for healthcare. But believe it or not, the United States between 1982 and 2001, severe disability actually fell about 25%. And of course, this is not disease related. I'm pretty sure that when it comes to dementia may not be the case. But I guess, some of those trends have been starting to change, not only because of the increased risk of dementia, but also the increased risk of obesity. Sure. And that's something that obviously we talked just a few minutes ago. How do I see that, obesity obviously brings, obviously potentially major risk factor like right. diabetes, cardiovascular disease, increased risk of stroke, all of this, even diabetes, all these medical problems that, obviously you increase the risk of disability.
I think that kind of returns right back to that quality issue. With healthcare and what we're seeing right now, and socially here in the United States, I think the quality of those years has improved. Right. To be completely honest, it's improved on so many levels that there's more senior-oriented programs than we've ever had before, and there could be more, but there's more now. There's more assistive devices to continue to stay mobile and independent, and to be able to go out and live an active lifestyle, even if you are disabled to a point where you 15, 20 years ago would not have had the opportunity to go out. I think, now that we're living longer, we do still have a lot of good health and a lot of good abilities to get out there. And
the model is going to be pushed by the new generation of senior citizens. It seems like every new generation of senior citizen is pushing the model. And I think we're going to see those communities develop. Sure. And people are not going to, I think fewer and fewer people are going to be in assisted living, probably through healthier lifestyles, because their kids generally are healthier. Hope they're living healthier lifestyles, but they're gonna see what mom and dad went through and what grandma and grandpa went through, and they're gonna say, we don't want that,
right?
And they're gonna move the model socially so that they can stay at home.
I agree. I think the age at home, trend is obviously huge right now, and that's why we have seen a lot of other technologies and technology companies trying to obviously right. keep that, like obviously here the electronic caregiver here in Las Cruces, right? That obviously they're kind of entrepreneurs and on this keeping people at home.
I really feel the tech savvy senior is going to be the biggest thing coming up here in the near future.
Right.
We are currently we're taking care of the greatest generation. They're the generation that fought in the wars and did not have the computer chip or the microchip like the subsequent generations have invented and implemented. There's so many people here in our city alone that work for NASA, that work for White Sands Missile Range, that are brilliant minds, technologically savvy.
And they have
minds.
the pad that you have.
Correct.
Everyone has a pad or a phone.
Do. Yeah.
And they know how to use it. Better than me. A lot of the people I know who are older than me can use it better than me. I'm going to have to, conquer the curve at some point.
You still Facebook. You know what you're doing.
Well,
you're socially active.
Right. That's the other thing. Facebook, does that really count as socially active? I mean, do you
does.
think it? I don't think it does.
Well, let's ask the expert opinion.
No, I don't think so. Socially, it's interact face to face with somebody, not with a screen of a
right. I agree with that. I think when we first discovered Facebook, when it first came out, we thought, aha, this is how mom and grandma can stay active.
Right.
But it just builds so much anxiety, and just sitting across from somebody and talking to them is just so much more important.
Yeah, I think it does help, obviously, especially when you're able to do FaceTime with somebody. I think that's pretty unique, obviously, especially if you're far. But yeah, from there to socializing, that's a whole different story.
Have you ever asked your patients to turn off the computer when they go, just to reduce their anxiety? Because I know when I turn off Facebook, my anxiety level goes way down. Have you ever prescribed that?
I haven't prescribed, but I can tell you that I hear a lot of stories about people spending hours in front of the computer,
right?
Because of their limited mobility sometimes,
right?
So that's where they interact, that's where they play, that's where they watch videos,
And the anxiety levels skyrocket. It's so nice to turn off the device.
So one other thing that I wanted to talk to today is obviously about the cost of aging and the cost of of healthcare. And then obviously, as the population aging is likely to influence the patterns of healthcare spending. And I think, in developed countries like here, the care is obviously more expensive because we have more technology, we have more institutions, we have more long-term care facilities compared to potentially other countries that may not have this one. And especially when it comes to technologies, I think patients. Here in developed countries, they do have a lot of options suddenly. Something happens to you, you have a medical problem, and you can do A, B, C, or D, compared to other countries that may not have those options. And that's had been like a major concern. Recently, I read, how expensive like it is the care of just one hospital bed, one hospital night.
Right.
It's just the amount, because they were saying that most of the healthcare that we're spending also is going to the hospitals. And so yeah, I think finding, and that's a whole different podcast for sure, but finding different models of care, on how to take care of these older adults, is gonna be huge. And that's something that I know that the health insurances, hospitals, societies, are working on trying to provide better care. But these models of care, they're gonna need to change, and to better provide service for the seniors.
Sure, and the cost of living hasn't gone down, right? The life expectancy has gone up. The
Right.
cost of living hasn't gone down, and now we're seeing our aging population that's saved up with our 401ks or their savings, and they're living longer than what they had expected, right?
Yeah.
So they're having to be really, really tight with their
Yeah.
pocketbook. That it's not gotten any better. There's not a lot from my standpoint that I've seen that's improving in that area, other than the senior population themselves tackling it on. See, we have this wonderful generation that they see a problem, they go at it. They don't just shy away from it. And they're in the process of coming up with ways of communal living, like you had said earlier, where we share in our costs of living establishments, and we are able to take care of each other in an aspect.
That's going to be the driving force, and you see it more when you put somebody into an assisted living facility. You're probably looking at $5,000 a month.
Yes.
People don't have that kind of wealth. There's a huge segment that just don't have that kind of wealth, and so that's really, it's good to be more than, we wish we had a commune to live in. We have to find a way to live. We have to find a different way to live, because we can't afford a $5,000 a month outlay to be in assisted living. As far as the doctor's visits, I mean, all that goes down to the healthier living. I mean, prevent the possibility of having to go to the emergency room, or to go to the hospital, and that can only be done by a healthier living, don't you think?
I agree, and I think that's why all health insurance, centers of Medicare, they're putting a lot of pressure of early detection and preventive medicine. I always said, when you buy a car, you're required to have insurance, and that's some point, obviously has been a lot of controversy regarding that, obviously, but I do feel that us as a person, we need to take some responsibility and some accountability in our healthcare, in our health. So I think that, early detection of diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, I think those are the key factors. Obviously, screening for cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, whatever. Obviously, those are going to be key factors, for preventing these healthcare costs go sky high. Especially, we're talking about, we're just seeing, this aging population, we're just starting to see the changes just, in the next 5, 10, 30 years. That's when it's going to hit us the most. We're just starting to feel it right now. But this is not close to where it's going to be in the next few years.
You're very right when you're talking about preventative maintenance. Insurances are really pushing for that preventative maintenance, to make it so that you don't have to draw so much on them in the future. There's a huge push with that through just private insurances and CMS alone that are focused on giving discounts, rebates if you are part of a gym, or if you're, you go to your doctor and you can verify that you're a non-smoker, things like that are allowing for insurances to kind of open up a little bit more and accept a little bit more in the final process.
I think something that has always been shown too is that the late part of your life usually is that when you spend most of your money when it comes to healthcare. Fortunate, at least here in the United States, has not changed very drastically in the last few years because of the increased attention for patients and for healthcare providers about advanced directives. I think that's something that, obviously something that we as a geriatrician, we do push a lot about, making sure that patients, they do have advanced directives and they do provide us with the decision about when it comes to end of life care. I think that's something that, we as healthcare providers, sometimes we provide care that may not necessarily be needed or eventually may not be something that the patient would have liked. So I think, advanced directive is something that, it needs to get better. It needs to get more aware, the community, healthcare community, and also with the patients.
That's definitely one of the weakest links, especially in my expertise, is financial security for senior citizens.
Right.
It's so complicated, the different avenues that you can do for savings and preparing for the retirement age. It's so complicated that even the people, every time I've gone to a seminar and they have someone who's talking about money management, wealth management, those rooms are always packed. Right. Because that is the one knowledge deficiency, I think, across the board where people are just dying for
Right.
answers.
And then there's the level of person below that too, and there's a huge level of people who have no financial security.
Right.
They will depend on family and Social Security. That's the only place that they're gonna, and so they're looking for Medicare. What are they gonna? So that's how they're planning their future. How long can they work? Because many people, because they didn't plan, are going to have to work until they absolutely cannot work anymore.
That's where the question comes up for Social Security to be raised from age 65 to 70. That's a viable viable question that'll be faced here very soon, I believe.
I agree, and I think that's something when it comes to older adults deciding to retire. I think it came at some point when Medicare said you're 65 and older, you will get Medicare. It becomes kind of the age for retiring, but really it was not related to health, or it was not related to how able you were able to do your work or not. It seems to me that we kind of, as a society, we assume we're 65. Well, I guess it's time to retire, and I think that's something that obviously I think there should be a trend of not necessary going to that path. What's interesting also when I was reading is the age of retirement. As we said, the life expectancy of after retirement for average, obviously for a male, is 18 years compared to a woman that is 22 years.
That's
And
a big
and
difference.
the reality is, I think this is something huge, especially when it comes financially, is that people, the reality, you retired and you have many years to go, and you need to be prepared financially, emotionally, physically, everything, just because we're living longer.
And that study is as of now. Could you imagine 10 years from now when we're needing to draw from from these programs or from these savings? That I think that life expectancy is going to be even higher. So we have to plan for that accordingly. And that's where talking with those types of wealth management or savings folks will really help fill in those.
And I think something that
deficiencies.
that is not well understood is that I think as we get older, we do have the knowledge, we do have the skills. I think they could be very valuable for, obviously, for certain companies or for work, and I think that's something that is misused in this workforce right now, and I think they should be more opportunities, and seniors and older adults should be more welcome to provide that experience that they have in this in current times.
What's happening? We were just talking about this on a radio program that I was on earlier, and that is how corporate America, believe it or not, is trying to incorporate the senior with the young person, because the senior brings with it brings with them this body of knowledge and this way of doing work and this way of engaging that young workers today out of college don't have, and that's that one-on-one, that handshake, that eyeball to eyeball kind of experience. That is sort of being bred out of our children because everything is so fast. It's got to be texted. It's got to be emailed. No more phone calling. Nobody uses the telephone even anymore. And so this corporate America movement is to move seniors into positions where they are in a group, a team of young people, and the young people can learn from them, and the seniors, the older people, can learn from the young people. It's really an amazing thing because when corporate America recognizes that they can maximize profits by including senior citizens, then that means that's going to grow some legs and crawl.
Yeah, and for some of the seniors that they're hearing, actually, something that I found very interesting is that there is some evidence that staying in labor force after the age of 55 actually will lower the risk of cognitive decline. So obviously staying at work, will have some advantages.
That reminds me what you were saying, Keith. I had to look it up on Google. I wanted to get the name of the movie, The Intern. Have you seen that? Robert De Niro. What a great,
that's a good movie.
What a great movie. And then what you're talking about is so right. Yeah. Just in learning from people who have done it before, done it for decades, and then teach the younger generation. This is how we do it. This is how you have a conversation with an actual human being.
My daughter, who's a senior at NMSU now, and she says to me when I walk down the street in Las Cruces, I've lived here for so long, there's not invariably people are going to come up to me and start talking to me. And she says, "Dad, how come everyone knows you?" I says, "Well, everyone doesn't just know me. It's just our generation. We talk." Right. And I said, "We didn't engage people on computer. We talk. We go outside and we shake hands and we get involved and that's us older guys.
Right.
And this is what we can pass on to our kids.
We didn't meet a stranger. We met a friend.
Right. That's true. That's true. And it's hard. Me as a parent of young kids, it's hard to kind of live this generation where they have so much technology and iPhones and iPads compared to my generation. My generation, we go out, we play with neighbors, we ride bicycles. Now, I see my kids, the iPads and then just go outside, get some sun out.
And then there's the university model where they don't want kids to actually go to class anymore at the university. They have these remote sites where they all can log onto their computer. And I told my daughter, I said, no, you're going to go to class and you're going to meet people.
Right.
And you're going to get engaged with your professors. It's not going to just be on the screen, which she did, and she enjoys that much better. But that's a model that's being pushed on our young people, and I think to sort of wean them off that, it takes the senior population. It takes people our age.
Right. Yeah, that is correct. That is correct. I wanted to share something that we discussed a little bit earlier. Is about obviously about living at home, and I think in the past, living alone, it was thought that it would be like a social isolation or family abandonment, and as you said earlier, the reality is that older adults, some of them, they do prefer to stay in their own towns, their own communities, even to obviously potentially live alone. They have some of them obviously that is related to greater longevity, expanded social benefits, increased home ownership, and there's increased, obviously, there's some of the, especially here in Las Cruces, there's a lot of communities that they're actually very friendly to older adults, and that they emphasize in activities, social life. And they have, some of the patients that I see, they have created very good friends. And I think, for some of them, they're really hard to move.
Yeah.
And so I think, this, as I said, going back to living at home, I think that's something that, we're going to be seeing more and more, and it's going to be pushed more and more. But I think it's something good. I think, as you mentioned, long-term care facilities, not that I don't feel that they're good for some people, but obviously it's something that we, especially our generation, we all trying to stay independent as much as we can.
Let's not omit the vice versa of that as well. I work in home care, and that's my specialty. But I do see many cases where I have to refer my client to a
Right.
facility setting, just because of the lack of socialization when you're stuck at home, and if you don't have family visiting you often, friends
Right.
visiting you often.
That's the key, is family
Mhm.
visiting.
Mhm.
Because when we go visit my wife's mother, she has lots of family here visiting her. We see people there who don't have any family visiting them, and they're just hungry for some kind of engagement. But your industry is going to be fascinating over the next 10, 20 years.
Oh, man.
See how it evolves, because
Yeah.
I think more pressure is going to be on your style of caregiving than on the existing style.
Yeah, and I agree. I think when it comes back to assisted livings or facilities, I agree. I see so many times, patients coming here saying, "Mom is so isolated, maybe so lonely," and some of these patients, and then they move, and they have been very social before, and they move to these facilities, and they do so well because they interact with a lot of people. They have a lot of activities. Just the fact that just having a meal with somebody, obviously
Yeah.
that's huge.
Yeah, yeah, interesting.
Very well. Well, I think it has been great talk. Do you, Adrian? Do you want to add anything else? Anything else that we missed here
Let
today?
me ask Keith a question.
Sure.
Okay, you've been doing the Southwest Senior Radio Show. You did that 10 years roughly?
Yeah.
About 10
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
What was the topic that got the most attention? The topic that got the most conversation started from it?
Well, I'll tell you, to be truthful, anything that had to do with health, no.
Right.
It always was something intellectual.
Okay.
It was always something maybe nostalgic. But we always got the most response in the newspaper and on the radio because people, of course, they need to hear the health information, but that's not as fun as nostalgia.
Right.
Remembering then, way back then, or just something intellectual, maybe philosophical, because we never stop being thinking people. We never stop wanting to learn something. And sometimes to learn, my grandpa taught me this. She said, sometimes when you're moving forward and you're lost, look backwards because you may find something that you didn't see before that will help you move forward. Wow. And I've done that so many times in my life where you just stop, look back, and say, you know what? He's right. I mean, there's something I missed that can help me go forward.
Right. Wow, that's wonderful. See,
Yeah,
that helps us
good.
For future podcasts.
It's sort of like,
we got to be able to.
Have you ever hiked and ever just you're chugging along up the mountain and you're hiking and all of a sudden you stop, drink some water, and then you turn back because you never saw it from that vantage point. And it's just a whole different scene. It's beautiful. And so now when you hike now, you should always stop, drink some water, and look back because you see it in a different...
Appreciate what you've been able to do already. Right. Yeah, see, that's beautiful.
Well, that's very good. Thank you very much for your shares. I just want to finish with something here that we wrote just to kind of conclude. And it says, population aging is a powerful and transforming demographic force. We're only just beginning to comprehend its impacts at the national, global levels. As we prepare for the new demographic reality, we hope this report raises awareness not only about the critical link between the global health and aging, but also about the importance of rigorous and coordinated research to close gaps in our knowledge and the need for action based on evidence-based policies. I think, this is kind of a good statement, to get us into, give us some room, so potential topics that we may address in the future. And for sure, I always have been very excited about aging and geriatric medicine. And I think, that was one of the main issues, obviously, for Geritalks to really bring not only, as Keith was saying, not only topics of healthcare, but also topics that eventually will be interesting to all people who hear us.
Sure. And I really appreciate you, Keith, for coming in, helping us do this.
It was fun.
This conversation really sets the litmus for us to where we can grow from, right? We addressed and touched on so much stuff topically that when the commenters, after they hear our podcast, they can comment and say, expand on this, expand on that. Right. It gives us direction. Yeah. And I don't think we could have done that with any other guest. So I really appreciate
that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Keith. We really appreciate your time. Adrian, anything else that you would like to say?
Adios.
Very well, guys. Well, thank you very much for hearing us today. This is Dr. Duran, Adrian, and thank you, Keith, for being with us today. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Please remember to listen to us on Spotify and Google Play. Watch us at YouTube at Southwest Center on Aging.
We can't do this podcast without your questions, so please feel free to leave comments on our channel, and we'll be more than happy to research and get back to you guys.
And remember, let's celebrate aging.